Hello, and thank you for joining us for Changer Chats. I'm Grant Venable, Director of Change at Be the Change Volunteers. On this episode of Changer Chats, we have two longtime changers joining the show. Both started serving with BTCV when they were college students. Now both are professional SPED teachers, or as we love to say, exceptional ed teachers. Maddy and Bailey, welcome to Changer Chats.
Thank you so much for having us, Grant.
For our audience members who have not had a chance to meet you, I'd like to have each of you introduce yourselves and share where you teach and how many BTCV projects you have served on. Also, if you remember all the locations, because you guys have been to more than one place. Bailey, can you go first for us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Bailey Womble. I'm originally from St. Clair, Missouri. I now live at the Lake of the Ozarks, and I teach K-2 special education. I'm in a self-contained life skills classroom. I've been on 4 BTCV builds. My first two were to Uganda. My second build, or my third build, I guess it would be to Peru. And then my fourth build was to Malawi.
And Maddy?
Hi, I'm Maddy Licocci. I'm originally from Libertyville, Illinois, but I've lived in Nashville, Tennessee for the past 5 years. I am a high school life skills special education teacher, so I work with kids from ages 14 to 22 years old with more severe needs. And I have been on 5 BTCV builds. My first 3 were to Uganda, and then my fourth was Peru, fifth was Malawi.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about how BTCV is trying to improve the way that we support SPED students and teachers in the countries where we're partnered. What inspired each of you to become SPED educators? Bailey, if you'll go first, please.
Yeah, so for me, I didn't always know that I wanted to be a special educator. I actually went into college with a psychology major. But Mizzou is really awesome and they have lots of volunteer opportunities. So I went on something called a Mizzou Alternative Break Trip to Detroit, Michigan. And I volunteered at an all-inclusive preschool. So I was working with preschoolers who had disabilities and preschoolers who were typically developing. And I just really fell in love with working with the students with disabilities. And they just have so much love to give, and every day was something different. And it just felt like pure joy going to work with them. So coming back after that, I changed my major right away, and I've just been in love with being a special educator ever since.
That's great. I love that you had a hands-on opportunity to really help guide your future from the university. Maddy, what inspired you to become a SPED educator?
Well, I actually have worked with people with disabilities for 27 years now. My
Wow.
my older brother is he actually just turned 30, Vinny. He has autism, so I kind of was born into the disability community and helping out at a very young age, attending speech therapy with him, being a peer mentor in different therapy groups, dance therapy, gymnastics, horse therapy, all different things. So I remember being in 6th grade and saying I wanted to be a special ed teacher. So I'm very happy to be living that dream.
27 years. Wow. So tell us about this, guys. Tell us when and why you thought about bringing SPED as a component to BTCV, because BTCV, we're focused quite a bit on infrastructure, equipment, and training is something that we want to improve on how we deliver it, but we haven't really focused on SPED other than to say we should try to make our buildings accessible. Tell us why you thought about bringing SPED into BTCV.
Yeah. So on my first build with Be the Change, I received a scholarship to attend. And so it was through the University of Missouri. It was like a course I was taking in the summer, attending my first BTCV build in Uganda. And so the first portion of the trip was a traditional BTCV build. And then the second portion, I moved in with our community partner and stayed with him for about a week and taught in schools. And so I had a lot of questions about what special ed looked like because that was my major.
Yeah.
And really not a lot of people could answer that question in Uganda, in the community we were working in. And so, and I also did not see anyone with a disability or like talk to anybody who I thought maybe had a disability where you couldn't see it. And so finally, I was able to talk with some of the community members and teachers, and we were able to get to a point where they understood that I was looking for quote unquote students who have difficulty with brain development. And so they said that they stay home to learn and grow. And I will never forget that moment. And I've really taken that with me because I don't want anyone to stay home to learn and grow. Everybody deserves the opportunity to be included in school and learn and grow alongside their peers. So that is why I started thinking about, how could we do this? And then Bailey joined me the year after, and we kind of put our heads together because I'm sure she can speak for herself, but saw very similar things.
Bailey, what was your experience?
Very similar to Maddie. That was obviously something that I was looking for going into my first build, was to be able to work with some students with disabilities because, like Maddie, I also received the scholarship from the University of Missouri. So the second portion of my first build was also spent kind of teaching and learning from the teachers in a collaborative style. And there were just no students with disabilities that I could identify. That was really eye-opening for me, and it definitely got Maddie and I talking, and we brought the idea to Jimmy and Christy, and they were all for it. I think it really just goes along with Be the Changer's mission to ensure that everybody has the access to an education, including students with disabilities.
You both spoke at our last annual leadership meeting, and could you just share some of the strategy that you had developed for BTCV on how we could implement these programs, how we can implement better training? Can you outline that a bit for our listeners?
Yeah, so Maddie and I had originally created a sort of phased out plan. And we did a lot of work towards BTCV-SPED over the summer. And from some of the things that we learned with those experiences, we tweaked our phases a little bit. So that phase one, schools that are in phase one are in the education and training phase. So with the school in this phase, we would be going in and providing training, doing interviews to see what information the community knows and what they might need. And then from this, we can then determine a plan. And then so moving on to phase two, which is supports and resources. So a partner school that's in phase two, we're really working on establishing a professional partnership with some sort of knowledgeable special ed professional. Now that doesn't have to be a teacher. It could be like somebody who does assessments, any sort of therapist, somebody who has knowledge who can be there on the ground and who can provide support all year round. Because while we would love to be in all the places all the time, it's just not possible for Maddie and I to do. So then phase three then would be full implementation. So that would be a partner school where there's someone there, whether it's that special ed professional we've established a relationship with, or somebody within the school who's interested and willing to learn. Someone there who's helping to assess needs and make sure that all students within the community are learning. And then we would also really love to see some sort of vocational programming within this phase three. And this can help to ensure that these students with disabilities are learning a trade or skill that they can then use for a job one day.
I will say that our like big picture goal is that final like vocational programming because I think it's across most countries that we're working in, if there is any sort of special education support, it ends at a certain age. And we want to make sure that these students have skills, trade skills that they can use for a job one day so they can make money for themselves, for their family. So that is the big picture goal that we are working towards.
And you guys recently, you did a trip where you went on site evaluations. Can you share a bit about that and just what you've accomplished so far in the planning stages and even somewhat in the implementation of the new programs?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because each country is in a very different stage, and you might think that they're in one stage, and then you go and you do some interviews and you interact and you realize they're in a different stage. So I feel like Bailey and I are having to do a lot of like on the go changing the way that we're doing a training, or what kind of interviews we're doing, who we might do a training for. Um, so that has been a challenge, but a really good challenge, because it's just shown us how we need to continue to mold our different phases and how to best serve each community. So Bailey and I were able to go to Guatemala this summer and see a program an active special ed program in Chi-Chi. So that was wonderful. We learned a lot from them and were able to take some really good ideas, such as they have a program for parents that come and bring the kids with disabilities to go to school. They have a program where parents, they have to stay and they also have to travel sometimes far to get to this special ed school. So in order to make it really worth it for the families, they're able to do different crafts, different like sewing, knitting, make different things so that they can sell that for money. And then that pays for all the transportation to get there, or just is extra money in their pocket. So that was a really great idea that we took from them that we would love to implement along the way at some point. And then we went to Peru and we did a lot of training with community members, and we hadn't thought about doing training for students and talking about including our friends, including peers. We were focusing so much on training like the adults and teachers and family members. We hadn't thought about the students, and we were given this opportunity to sit down with all the students. So that was really eye-opening for Bailey and I. And then Bailey, do you want to talk a little bit about Malawi?
A really just inspiring time for us. We got there and right away we already could identify a student with a disability. The first day on the build, there was this young girl there who was seeming to communicate with what seemed like some sort of sign language. And then upon hearing her attempt to speak, we could tell that maybe she had experienced some sort of hearing loss. And then later on within the trip, we saw multiple other students with disabilities also come into school. And we got to meet with some of the teachers at first, and then later on we did a training with all of the teachers. And their mindset about people with disabilities was just something that we hadn't experienced yet. It was so positive, and they just truly believed that all students deserve to learn, and they were just so caring that they wanted to include all students as well, which is a huge part. And this initiative being successful is our community's kind of taking on that mindset that people with disabilities have value and they do deserve to go to school and learn. So we felt like that was a very productive stint with the teachers. We provided them a training over lots of different types of disabilities and things that they might do for students with those types of disabilities. And it was really cool to sit down with them and to just see their minds working and them engaging in conversation about what they were learning. And you could just really tell that they were taking it all in and trying to use it and maybe identify some other students that could use some extra support. So that would kind of be an example of a community that's maybe in that phase 2 or moving towards that phase 2 of trying to find a professional within the community or the surrounding area that can be on the ground providing more training and providing resources that the community needs to support all learners.
What have you guys seen as the biggest challenges to special education programs? And I know it makes sense to me that you say it's different from place to place, right? All of the challenges that we see just with our infrastructure projects are different from place to place. But what are some examples of the biggest challenges that you've seen to implementing these programs?
So Maddie kind of brought it up earlier, but this has really challenged us to be flexible and adaptable. We've worked really hard to create this grand plan and to make all these trainings and put all these resources together. And the plan doesn't always go as we hope it would. And it's really just taught us that that's okay. And that's the part of trying to start something new and being flexible and adapting things on the fly. So that way we are making the most out of our time and being productive was something important we learned over the summer. And this also kind of goes back to what I was just talking about regarding mindset. While some places like Macumba Village in Malawi, the people there hold a very positive mindset surrounding people with disabilities. Many other places in the countries and places where we go into hold a mindset that's a lot different and very negative. So in some places, people with disabilities are seen as outcasts, or maybe they are seen as being a curse, or that their disability is the result of the strength of their families. So I think we really just have to be prepared for our communities holding any type of mindset and then being able to adapt and provide them with what they need where they're currently at.
What has been the most encouraging or inspiring of your trip?
I think Malawi in general was such an inspiring build. The community just, Bailey and I were interviewing teachers, and they already had that mindset that of course everyone is going to be included in our school, and we could cross off like 3 trainings off the list due to them having that mindset. So that on its own was extremely inspiring and encouraging. But I think whenever there is a breakthrough with someone in the community, when Bailey and I are just having a conversation, or we're doing a training, we're doing an interview, whenever we see like it clicks for a person that, oh, this student is someone who might have a disability, and they start pointing different kids out, or they start talking to other teachers and they're collaborating about who might need some additional support. I'm like, it's so encouraging. That is why Bailey and I are doing what we're doing. Even if it just gets one more student into school, we've done our job. So that definitely encourages us to keep going.
What do you hope BTCV-SPED will look like in 5 years? Bailey, you tell us first.
Sure. So we really just hope that it's a well-oiled machine. We hope that it's one of the first things that's talked about when we are planning a new partnership or a new build. So kind of talking about it alongside infrastructure. And we really hope that all of our partner schools are receptive of this mission, no matter if they are kind of in that spot where their mindset's maybe not so positive, even if they are just willing to try and to learn.
Yeah. I really hope that the schools we're working with currently, at the beginning, I hope that in 5 years they have a vocational program that is providing trade skills to those students that might need them in order to get a job in the future. That I think is definitely our biggest goal. And having BTCV-SPED just be a part of the norm. I think that's already happening in Be the Change, which is awesome. It happens so quickly.
I love that you all both talk about jobs and how this is not just about taking care of someone forever, but allowing them not only to be included in education and receiving education, but to be included in the workforce. Because as you guys have heard us say over and over again, we believe that better education creates better jobs, and a better job is the only way out of poverty. So I just love that you both have that on the horizon. What are ways that changers and supporters can best support the SPED initiatives that we're getting?
So starting in 2025, Bailey and I are going to try to ask someone that goes on each build to kind of be our special education liaison. As Bailey and I cannot go on every build, we would love to, but this would be a person who would kind of collaborate with Bailey and I before the build, and we would talk through some trainings and the interview process, then they would go ahead and go on the build and do those interviews with either parents of a student who may have a disability, teachers, the principal potentially, and then determine if maybe they needed to talk through some trainings. So we definitely need changers who are willing to do that on the builds.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you both so much for your time today. I want to thank you for being exceptional education teachers and investing your hearts and your skills in this organization and in the communities that we serve in. But thank you both for joining us for this Changer Chat.
Thank you, Grant.
Thanks, Grant. It was so much fun.